many fishermen have argued that the UK did back down in the 70s to get into the EU in the first place, and it is such a small part of the UK economy. So why are you so confident the UK won't change tack?
Well, it's very true that fishing was considered expendable in the 1970s, and that led to 40 years of being trapped within the common fisheries policy on disadvantageous terms. I think what's different this time is that fishing has really become symbolic of Brexit. Many of the Brexit issues, trade issues, it's going to be years down the line before we know what the real outcome will be, maybe decades. But with fishing, we'll know by the end of the year whether we've got a good deal or a bad deal. So it has an immediacy. And also, I think, within the cabinet, within Parliament and across the country at large, there's an understanding that the fishing industry got an extremely bad deal back in the 70s, and there's an opportunity to right that wrong.
Is there anything comparable to this, Barrie? Because it strikes me as just abnormal that the French would demand the right to fish in UK waters. I mean, are they, do they have the right to hunt in Nottingham Forest? Are they allowed to, build highways in Birmingham? I mean, is there anything like this other than fish where they're asking to really infringe on UK land?
Not really. Not as part of a trade deal. I think the EU have very little leverage on fish. So what they've tried to do is make an artificial link with trade, say no trade deal unless you surrender on fish. I don't think that's going to work, but I can understand why they're using it. I mean, what the UK is asking for is nothing extraordinary. It's just the normal relationship between two countries, two coastal states that share stocks. So the EU's current relationship with Norway, for example, and another independent coastal state, is exactly what we want. Annual negotiations for a fisheries agreement, access to each other's fleets on negotiated terms, quota shares that reflect the resources in each other's waters. Absolutely normal. It's the EU that's aberrant in this, I think. EU is the outlier on fish.
What about, though, the UK's ability to land a catch in EU countries, Barrie? Because it's all very well wanting to increase the size of the UK fishing fleet, but you're going to have somewhere to sell this stuff. Are those two, are they tangled together, if you like, in the same net in this conversation around fishery?
I don't think they are. I mean, as I said, I think it's the EU that's trying to make this artificial linkage. If we didn't have access to, if there was no trade agreement, we would have to trade on WTO terms. I think that would be damaging for the UK. I think it would be damaging to a whole range of member states. So, the EU has to think very carefully about the balance of interest there. And on that, I think there are 5 countries that benefit from 5 member states that benefit from the access to UK waters. That leaves a large number of member states that haven't got a fishing interest that depends on access. So I think there's some hard thinking to be done in the European camp. I mean, there are fishing businesses on both sides of the channel that depend on this trade. There's a demand within the European countries for the resources that are caught in UK waters. There's a big interest in making this thing work. Whether the politics gets in the way is something we just can't really foresee at the moment.
Barrie, it's not all about borders and Brexit. Climate change is also an issue that fishermen face, globally. But I wonder what consequences climate change have had in the UK. I know your cod population, for example, is moving north.
That's right. In general, the stocks that we fish have been going in the right direction since about the year 2000. There's a big reduction in fishing pressure, and the stocks have been coming back up. But there are stocks that you're quite right. The scientists tell us that cod is moving northwards by about 12 kilometres a year. And that is causing problems. The concentrations of cod around the Shetland Islands and Iceland and the Barents Sea less so in the southern North Sea and the Channel, where cod is at the southernmost extent of its distribution range. So climate change, water temperature change is certainly having an effect on the distribution of stocks. Doesn't really impact on the regime that we have, how stocks are shared out, access over who fishes, and that's a kind of separate issue.
So these things are changing. In terms of just final question, if I could, on the Brexit negotiations, you want to go to the Norwegian model, Barrie, as you set out, where you get an annual agreement on this fishing relationship. Is there not a risk there then that every year your industry is caught up in the wider politics across the Channel, and that would lead to tension and a lack of predictability?
That's not what happens in the case of the current EU negotiations with Norway. Quota shares tend to settle down. So if they're based on a scientific assessment of what's in each other's waters, quota shares aren't renegotiated every year. And access only really becomes an issue if there's no overall agreement. I mean, if by the end of December there's no agreement between EU and Norway, we don't have access to Norwegian waters, they don't have access to our waters. And that's the picture that we would expect to apply between the EU and the UK, from next year.